Welcome to the Walking Dead universe, and this is the timeline breakdown. Before we fully dive into this timeline, we have to understand that this is not 100% accurate due to the fact that Dale stopped winding his watch to keep track of time, so we don't always know the exact day, but we can take into account many other things from the show. For example, between day 20 and 60, we don't have a lot of exact days for the main show's timeline, but we do have them for Fear the Walking Dead, since we saw a lot of them play out on screen, and not just small glimpses or flashbacks. So what I will do is insert those events from the main Walking Dead timeline in as close to as possible as we can make an assumption. Day 1 will be referred to as when the so-called global outbreak began. More accurately, when everything became known to the public. We know that for 130 days, the government, CDC, and scientists were trying to understand and contain what the so-called wild virus was. Unable to contain and stop the spread of the wildfire virus, before the initial public outbreak, Rick Grimes was injured during a shootout gone wrong, sending him into a coma. Soon after the public outbreak begins to spread like wildfire. Nick wakes up in Los Angeles in an abandoned church after him and his girlfriend Gloria have a night full of drugs. He finds her zombified eating a man before he flees the church, getting struck by a car. Madison talks to Tobias in her office at the high school, and he mentions reports and videos going around the internet of the start of the outbreak. These are more than likely the same type of reports that Shane mentions to Rick later on in the series when he tells him about the strange reports he saw on the news. Day 2, Nick escapes the hospital, taking the clothes of his hospital room neighbor. He calls his drug dealer Calvin in order to understand what drugs he was given. On day 3 in Kings County, Hannah and her children are driving in the SUV when they are in a car accident. After being reunited with her children, they try to escape to Atlanta in a helicopter at the local park, but Hannah is torn apart by walkers as she sacrifices herself for her children. Alicia and her two friends watch a video of a man being shot by police. Later that day, she visits her boyfriend who is very sick from a bite. Travis goes to his ex-wife Liza's house to get her and his son Chris. Much of the traffic around Los Angeles has started coming to a standstill on major roads and highways. Riots have started as the majority of the public believe that innocent people are being killed. Chris got off his bus and joins one of the riots. We can assume that this happened in most major cities as well. Travis finds Chris and asks Daniel if they can wait out the riots in his barbershop. This is also when the power starts to go out through the cities as well. Thomas Abigail tries to prevent Strand from going to Los Angeles after hearing all the reports, but Strand decides to go anyway and says he'll be back as soon as possible. Day 4, California declares a state of emergency that spans across a few states. The National Guard arrives and starts to set up safe zones in different suburban neighborhoods. Staff at the CDC start to leave as things begin looking worse, and there is no cure in sight. As riots begin, guards begin to evacuate prisoners at the West Georgia Correctional Facility. The guards take Tomas, Andrew, Big Tiny, Oscar, and Axel inside a cafeteria and lock them inside, saying they'll be back to get them soon. Tyrese and his sister Sasha lock themselves in their neighbor's underground bunker. Guillermo, the custodian, stays at the elderly home that he works out in order to keep himself and the residents safe from the outside world. Day 5, the National Guard has put up fences surrounding Madison's neighborhood and providing assistance and necessities for day-to-day life. The National Guard has made 12 fence-off neighborhoods in the Los Angeles area. The National Guard begins killing civilians that are not in the safe zones that have not fled the Los Angeles area. Chris has recorded the last 9 days on his camcorder, bringing us to day 13. This is when he spots the flashing light in a damaged building outside the safe zone. Day 14, Madison leaves the fenced safe zone area in order to investigate the flashing light in the window. Madison finds empty streets full of trash and bodies. This is the same day that Shane visits Rick in the hospital and witnesses the military shooting the dead and civilians. He is able to avoid being captured and blocks the door to Rick's room with a rollaway bed. Nick and Griselda are taken away by the National Guard to their facility. After this, Travis sees gunshot flashes where the flashlight signals were coming from, confirming that the National Guard is killing civilians that have not fled the area. On day 15, Strand is in the same cell as Nick and eyes him to help him able to escape. Operation Cobalt is declared by higher military officials. They are told to pack light and that their safety will be made top priority. They are to evacuate quietly, to not stir any suspicion, abandoning those that they were protecting. Alicia and Chris see the guards leaving the safe zone and the group decide to leave as well, going to get Nick and Griselda first. But the group does not know that Griselda has died due to septic shock from her injuries. Danielle releases thousands of walkers that were being held in the Coliseum and taking them to the refugee camp, using them as a distraction so that they can rescue Nick and Griselda and escape. Back in Atlanta, the military guarding the CDC is overrun and the majority of the staff that was left flee the facility. Lori, Carl, and Shane are stuck outside of Atlanta and meet the group on the highway. At the same time, Officer Dawn and her men help evacuate the patients at Grady Memorial and do a final sweep of the hospital. This is when the military bombs the city with napalm in a final attempt to contain the outbreak, actually killing those patients that were just evacuated. On day 16, early in the morning, Father Gabriel locks out those members of his congregation who were trying to find safety and shelter from the walkers. The group in fear are able to escape the compound, and Strand takes them to his oceanfront mansion, where he tells them his plan on escaping on his ship, the Abigail. By nightfall, Operation Cobalt is full-blown effect, and they begin bombing the Los Angeles area. The group is also able to escape to Strand's boat and set sail. Portland, San Diego, Vancouver, and all other major cities are bombed in a last-ditch effort by the military to contain the outbreak. On day 17, an emergency broadcast transmission can be heard stating that the U.S. Coast Guard is unable to provide any rescue or relief efforts by land, air, or sea. The Atlanta camp is created next to a quarry a few miles outside of Atlanta. Tony and Dave meet together somewhere on the I-95 outside of Philadelphia. In Baltimore, Maryland, Alpha, her husband, and Lydia await help from the army inside a shelter alongside other survivors. On day 20, the Abigail reaches the Mexican border. The next day, the group arrives at the Abigail estate and are welcomed by Celia. The group has their weapons taken, and Strand finds out his lover Thomas was bitten. Daniel wanders around the grounds and finds a cellar full of walkers. Chris leaves the estate, and Travis goes after him, leaving Madison and the group behind at the estate. Day 21, the next morning, Strand puts down Thomas and goes back on a promise of committing suicide to stay with him. On this night, Daniel lights the house on fire, trying to kill all the walkers locked up, and everyone has to flee the estate. Nick goes off by himself, and Daniel realizes that he has just done and possibly killing his daughter, Ophelia. Day 23, Madison continues her search for Nick and Travis. Alongside Strand, Ophelia, and Alicia, she discovers, upon returning to the coast, that the military has stolen the Abigail, thereby leaving them stranded in Mexico. At Alicia's suggestion, the group takes shelter in a coastal hotel, which has been barricaded from the inside. Daniel heads alongside the road as Nick towards Tijuana. His injuries are severe, with major burns to his leg, hand, and neck. Upon arriving in Tijuana, he searches in vain for water and escapes from a walker during his fight for survival. Later, after falling asleep, he is rescued by Efren and receives medical treatment from Lola Guerrero. On day 24, Travis and Chris find a car and use it. Before they leave, Chris searches a diner for supplies and is attacked by walkers. A group led by Brandon unintentionally rescue him, and Chris makes off with their can of beans. On day 26, Luciana finds Nick and brings him to her community for medical treatment for his wounds he has sustained. On day 32, Travis is tricked by Chris into letting his guard down long enough for Brandon and Derek to pin him down and kill James. Chris leaves his father behind, and Travis curses his son for doing so. On day 32, Chris volunteers to drive so Derek and Brandon can catch up on sleep. However, Chris nods off for a second and the truck rolls over. Chris is alive, but his leg is badly broken. He tries to crawl away, but Brandon shoots him dead before he and Derek walk away. On this day, the French announce that they believe they are close to finding a cure for the outbreak, but soon after that, the power grid starts to fail across all the CDC locations. On day 35, Travis stumbles across the hotel that Madison is at because Madison was putting on the hotel lights for Nick to possibly see, which turned out to be a bad mistake because it brought refugees from all over. The two boys that killed Chris arrive at the hotel as well. Travis finds out what happens and kills both of them. Ophelia left and made it to the U.S. border, encountering the Otto compound. On day 38, Travis, Alicia, and Madison are captured by the Otto militia. Nick and Luciano have also been captured. That night, Travis is shot while they are being transferred and throws himself out of a flying helicopter. On day 39, Nick and Madison arrive at the ranch and are forced to wait outside while Troy and Jake inform the residents of the recent events. They met Jeremiah Otto and begin to explore their new surroundings. Nick is anxious to leave as soon as possible, but Madison is more receptive to the idea of staying. and she tells him she is prepared to defend them if necessary. Daniel is rescued by janitors and reunites with Lola, who takes him to the Gonzales Dam to work undercover as a janitor. There he gets into a violent altercation with one of Dante's men. Dante recognizes his Salvadorian background and correctly deduces that he is a proficient killer, a former member of the Sombra Negra death squads, and received training from the CIA. He becomes one of Dante's enforcers. On day 41, Strand arrives at the Gonzales Dam and is greeted by Dante Escovel, a former business associate of his, who denounces him as untrustworthy, and after Strand convinces him not to kill him, he decides to keep him as a slave. Day 42, as chaos descends on Baltimore, Alpha strangles a group member after he tries to escape their underground shelter and shaves her head. The man revives and begins killing the group, and Alpha kills her husband to escape with Lydia. Back on Fear on day 53, after much fighting and violence that began even before the outbreak, the Black Hat Nation moves onto the Otto compound, leading to tensions between the Black Hat Nation and the Otto militia. Day 59, Rick suddenly wakes up from his coma, having no idea what is going on or what has happened to the world. I'll be making a video soon on how Rick was able to survive so long in a coma. He wanders around the hospital, finding his way out. He comes across Hannah, the lady mentioned earlier, who is only half a body next to a bicycle that he uses to ride to his house. Rick realizes that his family is gone, but decides to go out and look for them. Rick gets struck in the face with a shovel by Dwayne and stays the night with him and Morgan. Well, that brings us to the end of our first Walking Dead universe timeline.